Now is Simon Hankinson, Senior Research Fellow for the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation, and Ammon Blair, a Senior Fellow at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. He specializes in border security and immigration policy with over 2 decades of experience as a U.S. Border Patrol agent and U.S. Army officer. Thank you both so much for being here. Now, Simon, what's your reaction to what we heard on the Minneapolis shooting from Kristi Noem?
Well, bottom line, she's right. I've been sadly predicting this for a long time. The circumstances are set up so that we will keep seeing these false martyrs created because the local politicians have not got the police out there doing their job, which is to enforce law and order in their cities, and instead are making ICE do not only its job of enforcing federal immigration law, but also their own protection from civilians, most of whom are nonviolent. I'm not going to say peaceful in every sense, but this guy, he came out to a protest packing a weapon and 2 extra magazines. I can't think of any motive that would bring him out there with that equipment that's positive. So it's regrettable. But if Minnesota and Minneapolis in particular would simply hand over these criminal, let's not forget criminal records, convictions, illegal immigrants to Immigration and Customs Enforcement to let them do their job and give them their due process, none of this would be happening.
Ammon, what's your reaction?
Sure. I would like to caveat off that as well. Look, all these operations that are happening in the streets of Minneapolis or any blue city is completely organized. They're organized by decentralized cells of a multitude of organizations. Whether that is Antifa, whether that is the pro-Palestinian movement, all there to seek to disrupt operations or ICE enforcement. Their whole goal is to force ICE to either to leave the area, to cede control of the situation, or to act exactly what we just saw here. Look, our ICE officers, our Border Patrol, are not trained to the level with which they are expected to perform now in these blue cities. And so this operation that happens now inside this blue city could have been prevented as well if the Department of Justice and other 3-letter agencies actually went after and networked all those that are currently operating in our streets against ICE, disrupted these operations, made sure that they could not be funded, and just completely dismantled this entire insurrection that's happening in our streets, as well as bifurcating the process and actually going into red states and working with red state local officials, as well as sheriff's departments, conducting ICE operations there and targeting operations, as opposed to the continuous focus on blue cities.
Now, Simon, Border Patrol says an investigation into the shooting is ongoing. So from what we know so far, was the agent likely justified in using force here?
Well, here's what I'll say on that. We are all, instantly armchair experts. As soon as one of these events happens, there's multiple people on Twitter saying, it was absolutely, defensible because the guy was attacked and it was self-defense, or they'll say this innocent person was just walking down the street and was shot by these vicious guards. All of that is a distraction, really, from the big picture. The big picture is that the left in this country, which includes most of the Democratic Party at this point, unfortunately, and it sure didn't 30 years ago, simply doesn't want immigration law enforced. And they're trying to nullify that law in one city, Minneapolis, as Ammon says, through the use of a lot of dark money and a lot of organized groups. If they can win in Minneapolis and stop the federal government from enforcing federal law that was passed with bipartisan votes, back in 1996 and 86 and 1951, then they will have achieved a victory. They can carry that on to other sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. Then they simply wait out this administration until they can open up the borders again. So this is a crucial strategic battle. And now everybody's focused on the shooting. It's sad. It's a tragedy when anyone loses their life for any reason. And they will eventually get to the bottom of it, just like they did with Renee Good. And they will have an answer about, whether the officer at this particular time, this particular place did exactly the right thing. But that is, that's a confusion that's taking our eyes off the big picture, which is far more important.
Now, Ammon, from what you know so far, was this a self-defense here?
100%. Look, this is all staged. All of this, every action that's in our streets right now has been staged by these organizations. They create what is known as either a dilemma action, where the Marxists use to force ICE to either cede, once again, control, or to act in a way that would actually allow the ICE agitators or those that are rioting to use as propaganda for their tools to conduct their operations throughout the rest of the United States. Look, just like what was said earlier, this is a complete strategic battlefield. They are completely muddying the waters between what a citizen is, what an illegal alien is, whether that's through rhetoric from illegal alien to undocumented non-citizen to migrant to newcomer. And now that they're here in the United States, Tim Walz and other governors are stating that they are members of the community, that they are our neighbors, that they are us. So whenever ICE or Border Patrol goes and conducts immigration enforcement, they'll show these images of family and also children, claim that they are just here to better their lives. And so they use this as propaganda to force exactly what was just stated earlier, to completely eradicate the whole idea and concept of citizenship through the entity known as ICE, who conducts the immigration enforcement at the front line.
Now, Simon, A.G. Bondi said today that Minneapolis's sanctuary city policies are to blame for this unrest. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And if you listen to the press conference with Noam, she points out that this doesn't happen all across the country. Why does it only happen in Seattle or Los Angeles or Portland or Minneapolis? It's because they do not honor ICE detainers. All the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents are asking is that when local law enforcement has someone in their custody who has a valid order for removal or other reason why federal authorities are allowed to take them into custody, they simply hand them over safely at the police station or in the prison behind, the scenes where no one is going to be able to get there and interfere and protest and, throw ice bottles or whatever. And these cities insist, as she said, I think 450 illegal alien criminals were released by Minneapolis. Well, that means ICE has to go out there and they've got to physically find them and arrest them. They're going to hostile neighborhoods and they're, coming up against these massive protests. And so they have to defend themselves, which means they've got to have more guys. They got to have guns. They got to have vehicles and so on. And it sets up the exact situation that will tempt fate and will see people killed. So, yeah, she's entirely right. This could all be prevented by local law enforcement doing their job and enforcing laws and cooperating with their brothers and sisters in federal agencies.
All right. Ammon Blair and Simon Hankinson, it's always a pleasure to have you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.